Hey everyone, welcome to the RightVIEWS Podcast. I am Prasanna Naidu,
And I'm Rahul Devdar.
and we are going to talk about climate change today and how is that linked to national security. Firstly, let's understand what's climate change actually and how is it leading to global warming. So, Rahul sir, can you explain us about this first?
So broadly speaking, it is, we can trace the change in temperatures across the earth, the global average global temperatures over more than 50,000 years, and even more based on drilling of ice in Antarctica. So based on that, what we have understood is that the temperature changes in the, Earth as a geographical unit, we find that the temperature moves in cycles, and that has been true since you know, however back we want to go and however back the data is. But suddenly, in around 1890s or 1900s, this trend started to sort of get disturbed, where there is evidence to suggest that the average global temperature, even at variety of times in the year, has been rising consistently since about 1890 and about 1900s that time. So this is what is called a slow creep of the temperature. Now, as we move to 1950s and 1970s, we find that the temperature increase has been a little more at a higher rate. So this actually created an alarm in 1980s and 1990s as to what exactly is happening with the global climate. So always the climate, as we can see, is follows cycles. So there is basically an ice age in the middle. There is a little bit of warming, but never before has the environmental temperatures across the world basically have risen at such a consistent rate. And the most, we can say, attributable, the most evident or most obvious cause that we can attribute this to is basically increase in the carbon dioxide component in the atmosphere. So this is one of the things that has, it's a, what you can say, a parallel observation. So causality is yet to be, so the, because there is a lot of debate about the causality. So no doubt carbon dioxide increase is leads to global warming. That's not a debate. The debate is whether the increase in carbon dioxide and methane in the atmosphere in the past decade was that the only reason or the dominant reason for the rise in temperature that we are seeing. So there are two things. One is a parallel observation that temperatures have been rising. On the other side, you have like carbon dioxide concentration, methane concentration has been rising. So are these two related? That is the question. So a lot of scientists believe, and there is some sort of a consensus emerging as to yes, this is the reason. Carbon dioxide is the main reason, and we should try and have zero carbon emissions so as to limit the rise of temperature, global temperatures. This temperature has been rising consistently, and if it rises, so there is a tipping point in this temperature. After this, you will find that the polar ice caps, the glacial reservoirs of many of these mountains, like the European Alps, Himalayas, and many of these Rocky Mountains also have glacial water reservoirs. These will melt. Even there will be a melting of ice in Antarctica.
Actually,
That
that has already started years ago.
yeah, that is already started. So that is not. But the rate at which it
Because
will happen at the tipping point will be substantially higher. So you will suddenly find that let's say We have evidence about glacial receding. So glaciers used to sort of reach particular level from the top of the mountain. If you measure, it used to come down 1,000 meters or so. Now they are only coming down to 500 or 550 meters as against 1,000 meters. So that much glacial ice is no longer forming. So that is already happening. But if we cross certain tipping point, which is about 4.5, I think, degrees from here, if we cross that, we will have no more glaciers. So it will be like a rocky mountains in Alps. There will be no ice.
Nice.
We
And
don't will not have an ice.
we are heading towards that, I guess, because this started long ago. Because I remember writing essays on this in my EVS paper in school, like environment paper, every year the same essay. So climate change was there. It's so common there. And recently, the Northern Sea route, people like Russia and all, they have started using it, which is not quite, the ships, the cargoes can't pass through it, and that's why they have to travel through a long route and reach the other place. But if so, if we say that these are some positive this thing, that it would be better for traveling in those glacial areas like Arctic and all.
Arctic, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, so this will have a huge impact on climate.
Yes, it will definitely have a huge impact on climate, and in fact, Arctic routes were frozen for like most of the modern history. That is, if you look at back in 1200 or 1300, the records of some Viking ships trying to navigate that area is there, but they were unable because it's icy.
Yeah, they have to break the ice first, and then the ship can move.
Correct. So the possibility has opened up only recently, and there are basically two routes which are navigable in summers. I think in one of our videos or podcast we have uploaded that picture of that Arctic routes. So there are two routes that are available for navigation only in summer, but that too only for icebreaker class ships. So icebreaker class ships is basically a particular kind of ship which has reinforced hull, and only I think Finland and Sweden are the only two countries which manufacture them. America does, but not in as much quantities. But Finland and Sweden are the dominant manufacturers. They manufacture about 80% of these ships, icebreaker class ships. Rest is basically, and in within them also Finland manufactures like 60 or 65, and Sweden manufactures like 25 or 20 or 25, like that. So they are pretty dominant in that. And Russia is the next one, and basically they are the players in the icebreaker class ships, which is required to navigate this northern routes. So basically, if you look at the advantages of northern routes, it cuts because of the unique geometry of a spherical shape. It is easier, or the kilometer wise it is smaller route than going around the equator. So because equator you have the maximum distance, and at the poles you have the smallest distance. So you will have an advantage in terms of number of kilometers or nautical miles of travel. So that is one thing. Secondly, Arctic also has a lot of minerals, particularly oil.
Mm.
So that kind of resources will also be open for exploitation, and there is a Council of Arctic States,
Yeah,
which basically, you know,
India became a member recently, 2013.
yeah, India became, but India is not a Arctic state per
Yeah.
se. So within that group also there is a special group called Arctic states,
Hmm.
which have rights or claims in that area. So that is, there are two types of claims. One is the Arctic states, claims of the Arctic states within that area, and second is basically it's an international waters, which is why India is part of it. But
These
China
Arctic
also
states, these Arctic states are those states which are within, like near the Arctic region, basically, right?
yeah. So basically, the Scandinavian states, Norway, Sweden, Finland,
Canada.
Greenland, Canada, Russia.
Hmm.
Um, I think,
America to some extent. Yeah.
yeah,
Maybe.
America, because
Huh.
Alaska is there.
Alaska is there. Huh.
So these are the dominant states in that who can claim to exploit the resources. So China is desperately trying to be part of that group so that it wants to exploit resources in the Arctic. So that is China is nowhere close to Arctic. So it is claimed that it is now Arctic state also. So that was interesting bit. You know, China is also Antarctic state if you ask me, and it is also an African state, definitely South American state. So we have lots of diversity.
Yeah.
But the claims for mining and these kinds of things in the Arctic region are held by the Arctic states. And I mean, China is definitely not part of that. India and other, like Japan is there. Japan is closer to Arctic than China, but Japan still has only navigation rights. Okay, which is something that India is also. I mean, the other group, which is part of these states, they are just looking for travel rights rather than any exploitation rights because they don't have claims in that area. It's
Hmm.
too far away, so this is
Hmm.
not a claiming. Is except China, of course. But that is the one side of global warming and the things. So, but the resources that we are talking about essentially are rare earths, minerals, uranium, oil predominantly, which is a contributor to global warming itself. So, oil and carbon based fuels, which is coal and oil, are the predominant contributors to global warming. Now, if you look at global warming, the causes of global warming, basically it is steam power. So, I mean, they have tried to sort of draw it back that if you're using carbon based fuels, then the sources of this carbon dioxide and carbon in the atmosphere is basically your power requirement, which comes from coal and peat, which is, they are very dirty fuels. So they release a lot of particulate matter, a lot of carbon dioxide, a lot of carbon monoxide, which is very reactive with the ozone layer and creates holes in the ozone layer. There is also livestock, which creates or emits methane and carbon dioxide, which is also responsible for substantial emissions on that front. Humans also emit carbon dioxide, I mean, all the time. Plants emit carbon dioxide during the night. During the day, they absorb carbon dioxide and give out oxygen. So, all these things are they have their own mechanism of contributing to carbon in the air and in the atmosphere, which is related, which is what is causing. Secondly, carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide and such compounds are only part of the problem. Main is methane and to a certain extent ethane, but methane is the more dominant culprit, and that is caused by livestock. So if you have a industrial farming of cows and sheep, you will be invariably producing methane, and that is causing global warming. So the question therefore then becomes whether you want to, I mean, how to reduce. Now there is an excellent presentation by Bill Gates, and I know that people hate Bill Gates because people believe that he is, capitalist who wants to run everything. I don't agree with that, but like some of these his moves are also not really helpful. Anyways, no one is 100% good or 100% bad. I'm sure Bill Gates has some bad sides, but I think his mathematical analysis of climate change and what we need to do to keep the temperature rise below 1.5 degrees and below 2.5 degrees overall, is basically that we need to be we need to emit zero carbon. We cannot emit low carbon. The low carbon time is gone. Okay, we need to emit zero carbon. Now, zero carbon, how will you emit zero carbon? You cannot really, there is no way of getting to zero carbon. Okay,
Exactly.
so, so invariably that means human being cannot breathe. Okay, so that is not possible. So what we are looking at is basically carbon withdrawing technologies. So carbon withdrawing meaning ki whatever is carbon in the air, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, we want means and mechanisms and techniques to withdraw it and plant it back into the soil. If we are able to achieve that, then we will have lower carbon dioxide concentration, methane concentration in the air, and therefore the warming will slow down. Now, the best mechanism for removing carbon dioxide is trees. Nothing, no technology is as good as trees. Okay. Now, carbon dioxide is also prevalent in the water, in oceans, which is sort of killing the coral reefs and killing those,
Aquatic life.
you've seen the multicolored fish and all this. Have you seen in Lakshadweep and all this? Those are under threat by dissolved carbon dioxide. So this carbon dioxide is dissolved in the seawater, and that is increasing the acidic nature of the seawater and causing this damage to these reefs and corals and some small plants, and which house all the ecology which supports these small fishes, and these small fishes then support the big fishes, and these big fishes are eaten by sharks and whales. So it is creating a mess in that. However, in the sea you have different kinds of algae which are basically super absorbent in terms of carbon dioxide. So they quickly absorb all the carbon dioxide from the um, uh, seawater, and the whole, you know, they release oxygen, which is important for fish and all these animals. So that is one aspect of sea-based carbon. So we explained air-based carbon, which is trees. Sea-based carbon, we have algae. But now we need to look at something to withdraw or to extract methane and ethane from atmosphere. Once we have that, we will be sort of fairly where we can reach or aim for a net zero emissions.
I have seen somewhere that this methane can be used for producing biogas. Is that possible?
Yes, methane is biogas basically, but so basically methane can be emitted by a variety of means. If you see the the pieces of farm animals, if you process them, you will get methane, and methane is what basically is biogas. It's a combination of methane, ethane, and some of the complex hydrocarbons,
So this can
which
be
are in
used in,
gaseous form.
especially in rural areas.
Yes, but methane is not emitted. Methane is created. This is post creation. Okay, you have to process the dung or pieces of these animals to get methane. But these animals emit methane also from their bodies in gaseous form.
Okay.
So that cannot be controlled. That's why there is a particular stink in particular smell in uh, cow sheds or cow farms or whatever you want to call it. So that kind of specific, or even if you look at any herbivorous animal, because processing of plants are basically carbon based matter which they eat, and the process of digestion is involves emission of these gases. Okay. So these gases definitely, if cows want to digest this food, some amount of methane will be emitted. So it's not the fault of the cows or anything. They will emit. So my point is ki, can you extract it from the atmosphere? That's the main part.
Yeah.
The other smaller pollutants, basically, if you look at sulfur or these kinds of lead in petrol and diesel, it is used or it was used, and that used to cause pollution and human disease and infections. That is separate. It's not a big problem as much. So earlier, this chemicals in the AC and the refrigerator, they were called CFC chemicals. They used to be released, and their release would damage the ozone layer. So they now we have CFC free refrigerators and air conditioners, and we have lead free petrol. So those kinds of things we have done. So there is progress on many of these fronts. But eventually, you'll have to take a call of extracting methane and other such products from the air. And the way to do it is what is missing. The other source of carbon dioxide, if you see, and carbon monoxide also, whenever it is emitted, like through cars, you have catalytic converters which ensure that the level of emission of carbon monoxide is minimized. But the main carbon emitters are the power plants. So we are a power, everything is now digital. Digital means you need power. Electricity is required for everything, charging batteries, everything requires power. Manufacturing these electric cars also requires power. Mining these electric for batteries, you need to mine rare earths and all these special chemicals, which production of which requires a lot of carbon. Okay, so whenever you say electric cars, the electric cars is just your usage of electric cars is basically you are now emitting less carbon. But to get the electric car, you are emitting more carbon. Life cycle carbon consumption is actually higher. So those things we have to take into account. And power plants are the most biggest carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide emitters. They have technology to scrub off carbon monoxide, but carbon dioxide still continues to be emitted because there is no other go. They have to emit carbon dioxide. The solution here is to go nuclear, have nuclear power. But once you talk about nuclear power, all the environmental activists they get a shock of their life. But nuclear power is basically the most eco-friendly power that you can get per kilowatt hour. The pollution impact of this power is much lesser as compared to any other form of energy source. Solar power also, to make those solar cells, you need a lot of energy consumption. So yes, if the solar cell works, I think they had done some study that if the solar cell is able to work for 25 years, then it is able to recover whatever carbon it saves by creating energy for 25 years. That much carbon is, then it becomes carbon neutral. That's the thing. So 20 years or 20, I don't remember the number. It's like pretty large number of years the solar cell has to work, and I mean that is a long time. Okay,
Right.
most of our products don't last for 25 years. I mean, it's like, if you have a solar powered iPhone from 1985 or 1995, this is not going to happen. So
iPhone would have launched 10 new generations.
yeah, so that is the thing. And secondly, if you look at our the next part of the question really is ki, why are these costs being imposed on developing countries? So when developed countries started developing, they emitted huge amount of carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide. They were inconsiderate to a certain extent when London and Paris were polluted to an extent that you won't be able to believe in 1800s.
You are talking about the Paris Agreement.
No, no, no. I'm talking about 1800,
Yeah,
1890.
by saying that why the developing countries are being forced to be part of that agreement so that uh, they won't be able to
Yes.
develop as faster as the rich countries have in the past.
Yes, so that is the question. You have created this development at an enormous cost that you have imposed on the nature. Now we are imposing far less cost. Okay,
Hmm.
like for every I don't know, every dollar of our growth, we are imposing far less environmental cost than France or Germany or Italy or all these developed countries imposed.
Hmm.
Okay, the question is then, why are we not, I mean, why are you making it even more costly for us to develop? And this, on one side, it could also be attributed to all these kinds of non-tariff barriers. So basically, the world is also not forgotten all of these. So first, when there was free trade agreements, and then NAFTA came, and then World Trade Organization came, and all these things were promoting so-called free trade. Okay, so when WTO became, everyone became part of WTO, people thought that there will be no barriers to trade. But then they said, no, if you are not helping your workers, your product cannot be sold. So these non-tariff barriers came into being. So people realize ki, if you are polluting the environment, your products cannot be sold in the United States, or your products cannot be sold in Europe. You have to be ISO 9000 something certified, environmental ISO 10,000 something you have to comply with. Then only then you can sell your product. So these became non-tariff barriers, and that is why people are so suspicious, or developing countries are so suspicious of these terms and conditions. So when you have become rich, and now you are saying ki you can't become rich by the same process that you have become rich. I can't become rich the way you have become rich.
Hmm.
So okay, how can I become rich? So you deny me all the technologies. Okay, can I set up nuclear plants? Okay, no, 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 you are not allowed, because you will make nuclear weapons. So nuclear ban is being put on you. So then, how can I develop? You are not allowing me to develop using uh, carbon power plants, like
Hmm.
coal based power plants.
Hmm.
You are not allowing me to develop nuclear power. You are not allowing me to. So, what, solar power is the only power that I will use for development? And in that context, how much development is possible for me? So, that is the question. And oil burning and diesel burning, how much of oil and diesel will I burn? So these kinds of questions are being asked by developing countries, that if I want to develop and arrive at a quality of life, then you let me live in your country where the quality of life is high. I will leave my country in a green state, completely forested. So we will all have complete forest in India, and all Indians will live in America or Europe. Will that be acceptable? So no, no, no. That immigration is not allowed. Then immigration is not allowed. You are saying ki, so some sort of semblance of rationality has to come in. So if you are not allowing us to develop, that is not fair. What is fair is that yes, we will develop at substantially lower cost to environment than any other country has done previously. So India has committed to certain targets that it will achieve of reducing the emissions. So emissions per dollar of GDP, if you calculate, we are now trying to achieve the lowest emissions per dollar of GDP. Okay. Now that is a very ambitious goal. It is not very easy to achieve that. And it will take not just simple, straightforward, what you can say, taxes and carbon credit system, but it will take a lot of innovations. So this canal project, which Modi used these canals, covered them with solar cells, and the Coimbatore airport, Cochin airport, I think, which is completely solar powered. Those are like ambitious projects. Then we are just went on with LED bulbs to reduce the power consumption in across the country. Those are the kinds of solutions that we will have to seek, and we cannot rely on coal-based thermal power plants. We will have to go nuclear, and luckily, India declared itself as nuclear. So that is the best thing we have done. So the point is not nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons you will use once, and if you are using nuclear weapons, then it means things are pretty bad. But more important is nuclear power. We need to have nuclear power because we will need power. So if you see an average person in India, how much electricity he consumes today, we consume about 5% of the electricity that an average American consumes. Now, if imagine that now we will expand our electricity coverage, then from where will this electricity come? Will you burn all the coal for that electricity? That will create a big carbon dioxide emission. So we will have to develop technologies, and that's why not just you know it's not just the mega things that we have that matter, but also that what kind of buildings that we build, how much air conditioning. You know, if you see the design of our Bombay High Court before they made it air conditioned, it was the coolest place to be. You could wear a coat and robe and not sweat in Bombay High Court even in April because there
This
was constant breeze.
this is
After,
in which year you are talking about?
I'm talking about 92,
Acha,
94,
okay, okay.
that
Huh,
year.
huh.
Okay, the
I
breeze used to
wasn't even
be
born.
yeah. So I'm talking about that, and that time it was cooler. Okay, now after they made it air conditioned, the point
Hmm,
is that the flow of air became so restricted that you can't stand in the passage.
hmm.
You just sweat and drip inside. You melt inside practically. So, either you convert the whole thing into an AC place, or I mean, it's a mess. So my point is that if you are using architectural designs which complement the environment, so that AC is not required, the buildings that we have all glass facades. The glass facades is good for Sweden and Finland because they have problem cooling. I mean, heating the building. So glass buildings are better for them.
Hmm, hmm,
For us, it's the worst nightmare. Like full glass facades are not good for us.
hmm.
So you have to develop technologies that will help complement with our um, environment and climate, and that will reduce our energy consumption. So that is one way, and these small innovations have to be done at every stage. Now imagine that you are, let's say your energy consumption is tripled because 5% you are right, 5% of the total, or I think now it is 10% maybe. Even if you double your energy consumption, where are you going to get this coal from? And people are going to block this coal for you. God forbid the coal is in China. If the coal is in China, you're gone. It's not in China, it's in Indonesia, Australia, Indonesia, and India. Our coal is poor grade, but you have coal in Australia and Indonesia. But you can imagine that, you know, coal from Australia, if China and Australia are in a partnership, they are not, thankfully. But China will arm twist Australia into, denying any coal to India.
And if we consider rare earths for this solar technology and all,
There
then
you
rare
go.
earth is dominated by China. Even India has rare earth, but it's not capitalizing on it as it must be, I guess.
See, rare earth mining is very highly polluting. Okay.
Hmm, hmm,
US has got largest amount of rare earth reserves, but the kind of mining that is required to extract that is so polluting, and the area if you get the open pit mine, the whole area just is an environmental disaster. China is ready to take on these disasters.
Yeah, I mean, I have heard that there is a lake. There is a huge lake which doesn't have water. It just have this sludge of rare earths. It's extracted.
It's not beyond China to have drained all the water just to get the rare earth. So similarly, there is a lot of rare earths are not that rare. Okay, rare earths name is rare earth, but it is not that rare. Okay, it is there, but the process of accessing them is very difficult. Now, if you
Yeah.
look at the ocean floor mining, once ocean floor mining starts, you will find that there is a lot of rare earth sitting right in the bottom of ocean. Guess which country is busy mining oceans? China. China is exploring all the possibilities of mining oceans.
No, I mean, this is not new. No. There are many countries doing it. So,
Mostly for oil. Nobody is mining it for
acha,
minerals.
right. Okay, got
So we have deep sea oil exploration, but we don't have for
minerals.
So sea is a lot of things are unexplored in the sea.
Hmm. Hmm.
So now, if you're talking about global warming and if you're thinking that there will be a rise in ocean water levels, that will create another geopolitical issues like what Maldives has been highlighting time and time again, because their entire Maldives has got a height of about 2.5 or 3 meters above sea level. If sea levels rise by 3 meters, most of Maldives will be just left as like few trees will be left.
Hmm. Hmm.
So the country will go away.
And it's not only Maldives, there are many islands and archipelagos which face this situation. They
Forget
just vanish away.
the Mumbai High Court is not going to remain
Yeah, yeah.
because it is on reclaimed land.
Mm.
It is
And countries
almost,
like Bangladesh and West Bengal like, also
they will have
will
a
be
lot of
affected.
problems. Yeah. So how are we going to address those threats? Where are you going to house the Maldives population, Mauritius population? Mauritius still has some islands, so they will manage. But
So we covered how it will affect the geopolitics of this, like the climate change, how it will affect the geopolitics. But let's talk about how it will affect the national security as we started with. So as we said, that it will affect these coastal regions mainly and islands and archipelagos. Now, once like as a country of like Maldives, lakhs of people, the population is there. They'll surely migrate. It will not be like they just woke up and the sea level rose. So they obviously will anticipate it and start migrating to other countries. And obviously, these islands will migrate to the country which is nearest to them, right? So, for example, India, the nearest island country is Sri Lanka. So imagine the people, the whole country migrating to India. How much of it affect us in terms of obviously, firstly, we know the population problem in India, how much populated we are already, and such lakhs of people coming to our country, our resources getting sacrificed for them. This will increase like many other problems. Like it will also increase the crime rate in some sense. And so these are some points which come to my mind. What do you see?
no, it is definitely that is a question, and some sort of refugee status will have to be given. But environmental refugees are very different from refugees of war and other calamities. And when we say environmental refugees or refugees of any sort of that matter, what you're looking at is not crime rate. I hardly believe that crime rate should be a problem. Okay. Now, when you are looking at people from war-torn
No,
countries,
I mean, I don't know how. I haven't read any study about it, but these are something which came to my mind, like crime rate, because people are migrating, so they
no,
don't have
resource
jobs.
basically battle of resources. It's a
Battle of
theory of
resources.
battle of resources basically. So but they will also bring a lot of value with them. So it's not like The thing is that people equate refugees to crime rate because most of these refugees come from war-torn countries where they are used to a higher level of violence. Okay, so for them it's a natural progression to have certain level of violence as normal, and that is creating the crime in a peaceful society which is not used to this kind of violence. So they will indulge in kind of violence because they are already formed as gangs in their own network, and that is the more you know dominant reason of their being more aggressive in these other countries where they migrate to. But in case of environment, I mean, there could be, we never know, but my sense is that it won't be that much because the environmental disaster is not going to happen like one fine day. Okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
so it's not going to happen that you had a job and you were working in a bank, and tomorrow bank is underwater, you're nowhere.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
won't
So
be.
they will
So it
anticipate.
will be, yeah, there will be anticipation, and there will be a gradual adjustment phase where they will, and they might not come. Nobody wants to come to India. India is not such a great country.
No,
We hope
yeah, agree,
we,
agree, agree. But
the
like,
poor will come to India. The rich will go to US.
yeah,
So
exactly.
that is, yeah. So that will be there,
For
and there will
example,
be some,
Bangladesh has a great threat due to this, and
exactly.
already Bangladeshis are coming to India through various means. So
Oh, no,
after that
no. That
happened,
is no. Bangladeshis coming to India are completely, that is non. It is related. It is not environmental threat.
yeah, yeah, that's not a null, but due to environment, more people will come. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah, that is possible. That is no doubt. But we'll have to learn to adjust with this. There is no other go. So the migration will be there, no doubt, and there will be debate about that also, and we'll have to make an adjustment for these kinds of people. Eventually, all countries will have to come and bear some. India will also see. Look at it from our country point of view. We have such a large coastline that is going to go inward. Okay, we'll have a lot of property disputes going in. So how will you arrange for those property disputes? Your flat is underwater. Now, where do you have a right?
And that
Suppose
too,
you,
just this came to my mind, like people who are buying, who have bought and are also buying flats in Mumbai, investing
yeah,
crores of rupees, and that will be underwater at some point. I
yeah.
mean,
I mean, and
you
it is.
can't be compensated also because it's
I
a
don't know. I
natural.
mean, are you insured, and are you? What kind of insurance will cover that? So, see, the insurance business model is basically to deny.
Exactly.
you know so
Act
they will
of
not
God.
pay for it, act of god or something. They will say, "Ki, this is not my point, this is not my problem."
Yeah.
So, or they would have written something, "Ki, this is exactly not covered," or some, they will wiggle out of it. But anyway, suppose you have a second floor flat in what you call Girgaon Chowpatty or some near that area, and now water levels have risen, and now your house is on seafront. So now your value will increase or decrease, and what? How will you manage that? And will you
नहीं
get
चलेगा.
to have?
अरे चौपाटी जाने की भी जरूरत नहीं है, घर पे पानी आता है.
I mean, will you be allowed to have boating rights? Can you? All these questions will come up, and how will you accommodate that? Suppose your main road, the Marine Drive, goes away. In Chennai, you will have a big problem where the whole Marina Bay goes away. And what will you do? All those things, and there are lots of properties and premium bungalows in, like, this Besant Nagar and all these places, golf course, all these bungalows will now suddenly become waterlogged. So how will you compensate them? Who will compensate them?
No one can. I don't think the government will take responsibility of that.
I don't know. So, so who is going to,
Pay for it.
these are, yeah. Suppose someone is enterprising enough and does some, what you call, reclamation by putting up, he erects a big structure which is 20 meters high. So his house is there.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
will you allow that? All these questions will come into debate, and there is going to be a lot of property rights related issues, public rights related issues, public infrastructure related issues. All these will come into, you have built now, so in Mumbai is building all this seaway, right?
Hmm.
If 4 meters the water rises, the seaway will become normal way. Then what will you do? So all these questions have to be answered. It's not easy to sort of simply say that yes, sea levels will rise, and it will create a massive load on the institutional network of the country. Okay, and now
Also, the
imagine
sea infrastructure will get affected, like the ports and all. That
ports will
will,
go.
huh, huh,
Now the port was there slowly, slowly. They will have to come inside.
yeah. So this will
So
have a
now
huge impact on the trade, international trade, and this will have impact on the employment and economy and all that stuff.
no, the ports will take care of themselves. That's not the point, because we have always been sort of reclaiming land. So there is technology available to raise the height of this land, and there is a lot of technology available in Norway and Denmark.
Hmm, hmm.
Those areas have really experimented with all these kinds of technology. Netherlands also. So that is not a problem. There are lots of technologies available. But the question is, ki when a country itself gets affected, like Maldives does, or Sri Lanka to a certain extent, reduces its area by some factors. So Sri Lanka is still a big country. It's not that small. But a country like Singapore, who is just very difficult to manage. So all these countries will have a challenge in terms of addressing the climate related issues. Now, where will they go? Or how will they manage? And how will the global community adapt to all this? This will be a new sort of negotiation will have to take place.
Hmm.
So now you might agree to house, US might say, "Ki I will house refugees from Singapore, but I will not house refugee from poor country like Maldives."
Hmm.
Okay, and then how many refugees will everyone house? Everyone will have a problem, right?
Yeah.
So all the coastal countries will have problem. US will, New York itself will have problem. So what will they do with that? Those kinds of issues will be there. So that is one aspect of the question, national security in this sense. So we have always been worried about attacks, and but national security also means attack on the infrastructure, on the institutions by natural forces. There is no artificial attack, but it's a environmental disaster. So what will you do? How will you react? And those kinds of things. Now imagine that similar, if the glacial water reservoirs of Himalayas dry up, and China keeps damming or putting dams on the rivers which flow into India, what will we do? Those will be the questions. Tibet is the highest plateau with the biggest water reservoir which feeds the entire India. So, in that sense, once you have a challenge of resources like water, you will have lots of difficulties, and water is going to be a big problem. So, we will have a lot of rainfall, but very less drinking water unless we prepare for it. And we have the technology. This technology comes to us. It's an age old, millennium old technology. It is well understood in India. In our history, we have used lots of such technologies to retain and use fresh water, harvest fresh water. We have to go back to those technologies to make ourselves, fresh water independent, and self-reliant in all these resources, oil, coal. Very difficult otherwise, because this is the see, unlike wars, security of resources is very difficult to uh, build out in your own country. So you don't have oil. Oil is available in Saudi Arabia. But if you are not friends with Saudi Arabia, what will happen to you? So these are the questions. So in first phase of development, in first parts of development, we were investing in our own country. Now we will be required to invest in other countries, other places, in the ocean, in the in Maldives, to help that Maldives doesn't go underwater, so that they have the technology to have their own infrastructure.
But do you see any like the top leadership doing this? Who like our leaders who are there, does they have that far-sightedness, and are they anticipating these things, thinking about it? Because we didn't even think about the second wave coming, where other countries were suffering, and still we didn't take much action. And I also read that some uh, parliamentary committee had submitted this report that the second wave may come most probably, and we must take these and these actions, like oxygen cylinders and this, that, blah blah blah. But still, action was not taken on that report.
See, second wave was already known. It was known that it is going to come. In fact, a lot of government circulars were sent to act on these. But states didn't act. Now, some people will say, why should states act? It is because healthcare is a state subject.
Yeah.
So,
No, healthcare is a state subject, but maybe even center place, for example, this Swachh Bharat, this, that, these are related to health, but they are taking initiatives. So maybe, and
But,
maybe if we consider BJP, then they also are ruling many states, right? And it's not that the second wave is not getting affected in those states.
No, it's not about that. See, I tell you the reason what is happening is political. We have political leaders who are third pass and fourth pass. Okay. If you go and if you really try to see their educational background, there it is like pathetic. Okay. Some are well educated, but in Marathi or in Sanskrit, we call them Padhat Murkh, which means they are literate, but they are fools. Okay. So if these kinds of people are going to be in charge, you're going to get this mess. You might have degrees, but you don't. Do you have the basic intelligence? Now, I mean, I don't want to digress into COVID-related issues, but
yeah, exactly. The point was, if do we have such leaders, and are they looking from this angle in the future?
We do. See, we do have thought leaders who have thought about these. We have an ongoing appreciation of these issues, but on policy front, we are as poor as we are, we have always been. So policy-led innovation has not come in, okay, because our policy, that whole thing has to be cleaned up. Our policy innovation is on how to create more corruption. We are the leaders, global leaders in how to create corruption. So if you find any, like last time we just in the minute we discussed this COVID related issue, that copycat remdesivir came out, right?
Yeah.
And you highlighted it in one of the tweets also.
Yeah.
How people are creating avenues for corruption, and it is. I knew it. Okay, this is the place where we have well evolved, innovation practices. Once we apply those innovation practices to environment and all, we will come up with innovative solutions. But first, we have to get rid of corruption. So we are in a separate level of problem. We are smartly corrupt. So we have to be stupid but clean. That is also better than smartly corrupt. Then we will become smartly non-corrupt and progressive. That is far away still. But yes, there is a lot of understanding because uh, fortunately our cultural appreciation for these issues is very high. So naturally, there is an understanding within the Indian population about environmental and ecological issues. So we don't foresee that there should be any problem convincing Indian population about the ecological challenge. Solutions we'll have to think about, use more, develop more innovative solutions for these problems.
Okay, then let's see if our leaders take the necessary policy action on this topic, and let's see what happens. And if you like this episode, do hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube. And you can also check out our other episodes available on YouTube as well as on other podcast platforms. Thank you.
Thank you.